What would you do if your 4-year-old outsmarted you, with just one sentence? It was a Wednesday. Just another day at Elon Musk's sprawling Bel Air estate. The sky was its usual LA blue, the scent of lemon blossoms drifting across the terrace. The humming of a nearby Tesla drone cam circled above, capturing quiet family moments for a future documentary Elon hadn't even approved yet. Inside the playroom, half science lab, half spaceship simulator, Elon knelt beside his youngest son, Leo, as they pieced together a Mars habitat model. "Okay, this dome will house the hydroponic gardens," Elon said, carefully placing a transparent plastic lid over the Lego base. Leo squinted, his tiny brows furrowed like a miniature engineer. "But Daddy," he began. Elon, distracted by an incoming notification on his Neuralink-enabled wrist cuff, barely looked up. Leo's voice was small but precise. "Why do you want to go to Mars if you can't fix Earth first?" Silence. The kind that stretches too long to ignore. Elon blinked. Slowly. As if trying to reset reality. He looked down at Leo, who was now calmly placing red bricks around the dome, unfazed by the grenade he'd just tossed into the middle of his father's universe. It wasn't the first time Leo had asked something philosophical. A few weeks earlier, he'd asked why people cried more when they lost money than when they lost time. But this one hit different. Hit harder. Elon sat back on his heels. His brain, usually 10 tabs open, running at 200 gigahertz, went completely still. He tried to speak but realized he didn't have an answer ready. Not one that made any real sense. Not one that a 4-year-old could understand, or that an adult could believe. The irony? Elon had faced presidents, foreign ministers, multi-billion-dollar lawsuits, rockets that blew up on live television, and short sellers who wanted to ruin him. But none of that left him as speechless as the quiet, innocent gaze of his child asking a question more powerful than a Falcon Heavy launch. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? "Because Mars is our backup plan," Elon said finally, voice softer than usual. Leo paused. "Like, when your real toy breaks, and you get another one?" "Ouch." "No," Elon replied, chuckling nervously. "It's more like, if something bad happens here, we can start over. We can make a better world." Leo looked up. "Then why not fix this one first? Wouldn't it be faster?" Elon stared at him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He wasn't even surprised. He was shaken. Because it wasn't just the question. It was the tone, gentle, sincere, curious. Leo didn't mean to challenge him. He wasn't arguing. He was just asking the thing no one had dared to. Why are we running away before we try everything to stay? Later that night, Elon sat alone in his study. The glass wall opened to the city below, twinkling like stars, but with less mystery and more noise. His mind kept looping back to Leo's voice. "Why do you want to go to Mars if you can't fix Earth first?" He pulled up an archived email from a decade ago. A pitch he wrote to investors about the colonization of Mars. He scanned the words, sustainability, human survival, multiplanetary insurance policy. All the usual justifications. But suddenly, it sounded like a fancy way of saying, "Let's bail before it's too late." He rubbed his temple. No. That wasn't fair. He had done things for Earth. Tesla. Solar City. The boring tunnels to reduce city traffic. He wasn't ignoring the planet. And yet, something about that question still gnawed at him. The next morning, at breakfast, Elon tried to shift the vibe. He wanted to reassert his role as the visionary dad, the innovator, the guy who had the answers. "Leo," he began casually, "what do you think we should do to fix Earth?" Leo didn't look up from his bowl of Cheerios. He was humming some made-up melody, swinging his legs off the edge of the stool. I dunno, he said with a shrug. Make people happy again. Like, stop making stuff that makes them sad. Elon blinked. Like what? Leo finally looked up. Phones that beep all day. And big cars that make loud noises. And news that scares mommy. There it was again. The simplicity. The truth. The unfiltered clarity of a child's heart. Elon wasn't sure if he was proud or overwhelmed. Possibly both. By midday, Elon cancelled 2 meetings. One with a crypto-backed lunar mining startup, and another with a new neural interface company. Instead, he pulled Leo out of his preschool early. "Wanna go on a secret mission?" he asked as Leo ran into his arms. "Where?" "Somewhere we can think." Leo lit up. "Will there be snacks?" "Absolutely," Elon smiled. "And stars." As the sleek matte black Tesla Model X curved along the Pacific Coast Highway, Elon glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. Leo was staring out the window, eyes wide, absorbing everything. Elon couldn't help but wonder, what if he'd spent more time listening before? What if the world didn't need more geniuses building things, but more children reminding us why we build in the first place? Maybe this wasn't just a trip. Maybe this was a turning point. In 1984, Pretoria, South Africa, was hot, dry, and unforgiving. So was the schoolyard at Bryanston High, where a thin, pale kid named Elon Musk sat alone with a tattered copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in one hand and a bloody nose in the other. He didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because he knew it wouldn't help. Tears were a sign you hadn't yet accepted that no one was coming to save you. The other boys had left already, bored after a few shoves, a kick, and a sharp insult or two. Elon wasn't new to it. The torment came in waves. Words first, fists later. But he didn't fight back. He rarely did. He was busy dreaming. Dreaming of machines that could fly, of planets untouched by cruelty, and of people who spoke through ideas instead of fists. That same evening, in the modest Musk family home, Elon sat across the dinner table from his father, Errol. A man with the kind of presence that silenced rooms before he ever said a word. "What happened to your face?" Errol asked, without looking up from his food. "Fell," Elon replied automatically. His mother, May, wasn't there that night, modeling trip in Cape Town. And Kimball, his younger brother, was upstairs playing a Commodore 64 game Elon had coded for him. Errol looked up then, just for a moment. Not with concern, more like curiosity. Then he nodded, as if that was enough. "You know, the world doesn't owe you kindness," he said. "You take what you can, while you can." Elon didn't respond. But something about that line sank into his bones, wrapping itself around the deeper parts of his ambition like roots in dry earth. That night, he didn't sleep. He laid awake listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, staring at the glow-in-the-dark solar system stickers on his bedroom ceiling, wondering if any of those stars held a kinder world. Fast forward to 1995. Palo Alto. Elon had just been rejected by Netscape. They didn't even give him an interview. He'd walked into the office, hoping to pitch himself in person. No one looked up. No one cared. So he walked out, sat in his beat-up BMW, and told himself, "Fine. I'll make something bigger than Netscape." Zip2 was born out of that moment. Then came PayPal. Then Tesla. SpaceX. Neuralink. The Boring Company. And with every success, Elon stacked a new brick atop the fortress of ambition he had started building as a boy in Pretoria. But underneath the ambition, burden. A sense of unshakable responsibility to do something enormous. To be so useful to humanity that no one could ever say he didn't matter. No one could ever shove him into the dirt again. Back in the present day, Elon sat across from Leo in a roadside diner somewhere near Monterey, California. Leo was blowing bubbles into his chocolate milk through a straw. Elon was pushing scrambled eggs around his plate, appetite lost somewhere in the question still echoing in his mind. He looked at his son and realized something uncomfortable. He barely knew what Leo's favorite cartoon was. Or what kind of music made him laugh. Or whether he liked crunchy peanut butter or smooth. He'd missed a lot. Business meetings, rocket launches, acquisitions, crises, they'd all taken priority. Not because he didn't love his children, but because he thought building the future was love. But Leo's question cracked that belief. Maybe the future wasn't about machines or colonies or interplanetary insurance. Maybe it was about connection. About learning to fix what was broken before discarding it for something shinier. He thought about his own father again. Elon Musk had always spoken about control. Power. Survival. He'd never taught empathy. Never once told Elon that being vulnerable was okay. That being confused didn't make you weak. But here was Leo, just 4 years old, teaching Elon the lesson his father never could. That asking the right question was sometimes more powerful than having the right answer. "Hey, Leo," Elon said, finally breaking the silence between bites of cold toast and melted ice cream. "Yeah. Did you know I used to get beat up at school a lot?" Leo's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because I was weird. I talked too much about space. I read too many books. I didn't really fit in." Leo tilted his head. "But being weird is good." Elon smiled softly. "I didn't know that back then." Leo leaned across the booth, sticky fingers grabbing Elon's hand. "I'm weird too." Elon squeezed his son's hand gently. "That's the best thing you could ever be." For a moment, the diner seemed to fade away, the clinking dishes, the buzzing overhead lights, the waitress pouring coffee for a trucker nearby. It was just the two of them. A boy who once dreamed of escaping Earth, and another boy who just wanted to understand it. Elon realized then that he wasn't just burdened by the weight of expectation from the world. He was also burdened by an unresolved past. A voice in his head that kept whispering, "Keep building. Keep escaping. Don't stop to feel." But Leo had stopped him. Made him feel. Made him remember the version of himself who once looked up at the stars not with conquest in mind, but with wonder. Later that night, they parked at a quiet overlook, stars sprawled across the sky like diamonds flung across velvet. Leo fell asleep in the back seat, clutching a plush rocket ship. Elon watched him for a long time. Then he looked up. And for the first time in years, he didn't think about launching to another planet. He thought about coming home. Leo Musk wasn't like most 4-year-olds. He was quieter. More observant. The kind of kid who would spend 20 minutes watching ants rebuild their hill after a rainstorm and then ask, "Do you think they get sad when their home is broken?" He wasn't necessarily precocious in the traditional sense, he wasn't reciting Shakespeare or doing calculus, but there was something undeniably wise about him. The kind of wisdom that came not from books or tutoring, but from a deep, unexplainable awareness of the world around him. May once said Leo had an old soul. Elon had brushed it off with a chuckle, replying, "He just absorbs data faster than average." But even he couldn't ignore the way Leo saw through people. Not past them. Not around them. Through. Leo was born on a rainy Thursday in Austin, Texas. He came out wide-eyed, blinking like he was trying to analyze the room rather than cry about it. Elon had held him awkwardly at first, equal parts awe and terror in his hands. "He looks focused," Elon had said, staring down at his newborn. The nurse laughed. "They all do. Give him 5 minutes, he'll be screaming like a champ." But he hadn't. Leo barely cried. Not then, not even later when he scraped his knees or dropped his favorite toy. He just watched, like he was studying cause and effect in real time. By the time he was 2, he could remember the name of every moon orbiting Jupiter, thanks to a bedtime story Elon turned into a space trivia game. But what impressed Elon even more wasn't what Leo remembered, it was what he noticed. Why does the moon follow us, Daddy? Why do people talk louder when they're scared? Why do some grown-ups smile but their eyes don't? They were simple questions. But they never left Elon. At preschool, Leo didn't cause trouble. But he also didn't quite fit in. He was polite, curious, even affectionate, but socially, he floated. He was around the other kids, not necessarily with them. One day, Elon received a call from the teacher. "Mr. Musk, nothing's wrong. Leo's doing fine. But, we're curious." About? Well, instead of joining the group during free play, Leo sat quietly in the corner and built a tiny city out of rocks and leaves. When I asked what it was, he said it was what Earth could look like if everyone slowed down and listened more. Elon paused. He said that? Word for word. Yes. Elon didn't respond. What could he say? That night, he watched Leo sleep, tangled in dinosaur sheets, one hand wrapped around his favorite stuffed fox. Elon felt something unfamiliar in his chest, a kind of smallness, a humility he rarely allowed to surface. Despite everything, wealth, fame, intellect, Elon often struggled with connection. It was a glitch in his operating system. A flaw he couldn't debug. But Leo connected without even trying. When Grimes and Elon separated, Leo had barely turned 3. While the adults navigated custody schedules and statements to the press, Leo simply walked into Elon's study one day, climbed into his lap, and asked, "Is it okay if love changes shape, as long as it doesn't disappear?" Elon froze. He didn't even know where Leo had heard something like that. Maybe a line from a cartoon. Maybe he made it up. But it became one of those sentences that stuck in Elon's brain like code he couldn't erase. He began hearing it in meetings. Reading it between the lines of quarterly reports. Feeling it every time he stepped into an empty room in a too large house. It wasn't just what Leo said. It was how he said it. No agenda. No ego. No attempt to be profound. Just pure, unfiltered truth from a child who hadn't yet learned to complicate things. And maybe that's what made his questions so destabilizing, especially to someone like Elon, who had spent decades believing that intelligence and complexity were the highest currencies. Leo was the reminder that clarity could be even more powerful. That sometimes the smartest person in the room was the one asking, not answering. During the road trip, as they stopped at a scenic overlook along Big Sur, Leo climbed out of the car and sat on a boulder, legs dangling. "Do you think the ocean gets tired?" he asked. "Tired?" Elon repeated, following him. "Yeah. It's always moving. Always loud. Doesn't it ever want to rest?" Elon looked out at the waves crashing against the rocks below. "I don't think the ocean knows how to stop." Leo nodded. Maybe that's why people stare at it. To remember that it's okay not to stop, but also okay to take a break. Elon laughed quietly. "You're going to put philosophers out of work." Leo giggled, then leaned his head on his dad's shoulder. "You work too much. You think too much. Your brain must be tired too." Elon didn't say anything. But his arm wrapped instinctively around Leo, and for once, he let himself rest, not physically, but emotionally. No press releases. No launch schedules. Just a quiet boy and a tired man staring at something ancient and endless. Later that night, Elon took out his phone and opened a blank note. He titled it, "Things Leo Teaches Me." And the first line he typed was, "You don't have to solve the universe to be part of it." In just 4 short years, Leo had become the brightest star in Elon's orbit. Not because of his intellect, but because of his heart. His presence. His fearless curiosity. He didn't care about rockets or revenues. He didn't know what the S&P 500 was. He couldn't pronounce Hyperloop yet. But he knew when someone was hurting. He knew when a room felt heavy. He knew when his dad needed to hear something nobody else was brave enough to say. And Elon was beginning to realize. Maybe this wasn't just a father-son relationship. Maybe Leo had shown up in his life for a much bigger reason. Elon faces public criticism about his Mars obsession and begins to unravel under the pressure. The questions from Leo keep echoing louder. It was hard to ignore the headlines. Elon Musk wants to escape Earth, but who's cleaning up the mess? Mars missions, megamansions, and missed priorities. Should we be funding colonies when Earth is burning? They came fast. Relentless. Every news cycle seemed to carry a new op-ed, a podcast takedown, a Twitter thread laced with snark. Normally, Elon tuned it out. He'd been the media's punching bag and golden child in equal measure, sometimes on the same day. But this time, it felt different. Because now, the criticism sounded familiar. Not in tone. In content. The same question, over and over, echoing in different forms. Why are we trying to leave before we fix what we have? The same thing his 4-year-old had asked, without malice, without an agenda. Just truth. Raw and inconvenient. 2 weeks after their road trip, Elon sat in his office atop the Tesla HQ tower in Austin. The walls were glass, the air sterile, the desk scattered with papers from half a dozen companies. But his eyes weren't on the spreadsheets. They were on a paused video. Leo, sitting on the floor of the playroom, holding a cardboard planet he'd painted himself. "This one is Earth," he was saying in the video, voice high and soft. "I made it green again." It was a clip Grimes had sent him earlier. Just in case you forgot what matters most. The message hit harder than he expected. He closed the video, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. Something inside was shifting. Something deep. For a man known for being emotionally stoic, Elon was beginning to feel unmoored. Later that day, he met with his communications team. A public Q&A was coming up, a major tech summit live-streamed globally. The questions were pre-screened, but that didn't mean they wouldn't be sharp. "We expect climate activists to push back hard on Mars again," said Claire, one of his senior PR leads. "Let them," Elon said, but with less conviction than usual. Claire looked up. "You okay?" "I'm fine." A pause. "Just tired of repeating the same defense." "Which is?" "That we can do both, fix Earth and explore Mars." "And you believe that?" she asked. Elon didn't answer. She nodded slowly. "I'll update the talking points." That night, he didn't go home. He stayed in a side room at HQ, laying flat on a couch barely long enough for his frame. The city buzzed below. Somewhere, Leo was probably dreaming about dinosaurs or clouds or rainbow-colored foxes. Elon closed his eyes. He thought about every time he'd stood on a stage and said, "We have to become a multiplanetary species." About how it always got applause. About how it made him feel untouchable. But now he was wondering, was he escaping responsibility disguised as vision? Leo's voice again, wouldn't it be faster to fix this one? And worse, what if he was right? The summit came 3 days later. Held in San Francisco, with thousands of attendees and millions more watching online, it was the kind of event Elon usually dominated with off-the-cuff charisma and unpredictable remarks that trended within minutes. This time felt different. During the Q&A, a climate scientist stood and asked, "Mr. Musk, why not use your immense resources and influence to lead a global climate restoration program instead of funding off-world colonies?" Elon hesitated. He glanced at the monitor off-stage where his own live feed reflected back at him. Then he took a breath. And said something no one expected. "You're right." The room fell silent. Elon continued, "We've made massive progress in EVs, solar, battery tech. But we're not doing enough. Not fast enough. We need a planetary repair program. One that rivals the Mars budget." He paused again. I used to think leaving was the best way to start fresh. But now, I'm starting to think fixing what we broke might be the real mission. The applause didn't come immediately. But when it did, it was different than before. It wasn't the kind of applause people gave to a celebrity. It was the kind they gave to someone who had finally heard them. Back in Austin that evening, Elon came home for dinner, early, for once. Leo ran to him, nearly slipping on the kitchen tiles in socks. Elon caught him midair. "I missed you." Leo grinned. "I missed you too, buddy." Elon kissed the top of his head. Leo pulled back and blinked. "You smell like pancakes." "I had a weird day." Leo nodded seriously. "Those are the best days." Elon laughed. "You might be right about that." Later, after story time and tickle fights, Elon tucked Leo Indiana. He sat on the edge of the bed a while longer, just watching him breathe. "Hey, Leo," he whispered. Leo stirred but didn't open his eyes. "I want you to know. You helped me see something I didn't before." Leo mumbled, half asleep, "Was it a spaceship?" Elon smiled. "No. It was Earth." Up to this point, Elon had always believed in the future. But now, for the first time in a long time, he was starting to believe in the present. In the planet beneath his feet. In the small voice that made him question everything. In the possibility that the greatest innovation of all wasn't a rocket or a robot, but a child's ability to change a man's heart. Twitter exploded within minutes. Or X, as Elon insisted it be called now. Clips from the summit were chopped, memed, stitched into reaction videos, and pushed to every corner of the internet. Elon Musk, maybe Mars isn't the priority. Breaking, Elon admits Earth deserves more focus. Visionary or surrender? Some praised him. Finally. A billionaire who listens. This is growth. Real growth. His son changed him. That's powerful. Others mocked him. So now he's pretending Earth is trendy again. Too little, too late. Bet he sells Earth coin next week. Hashtags like hashtag #FixEarthFirst and hashtag ElonPivot trended for 72 hours. His company's stocks fluctuated. Tesla dipped briefly before rebounding with a surge of retail investor support. SpaceX board members demanded a closed-door meeting. But Elon? He barely checked his phone. Instead, he was sitting in his backyard with Leo, watching bees dance between lavender stalks. Do bees get scared when people watch them? Leo asked. Elon looked up from his thoughts. Probably. Or maybe they're too busy working to care. Leo nodded. I like bees. They just keep going. Even when the flowers are messy. Inside, his executive assistant was fielding non-stop calls. Mr. Musk has nothing further to add to his statement at this time. Yes, we're aware of the investor concern. No, he's not available for a follow-up podcast. Yes, the quote was intentional. He said, I want to fix Earth. Direct words. She paused. Then smiled. And yes, his son really did ask that question. No, we're not releasing the video. Behind closed doors, the reactions were even more intense. At SpaceX headquarters, engineers speculated nervously about funding cuts. Are we killing Starship? Someone whispered. Never. He's just reprioritizing, replied another. I think. At Tesla, a senior product lead wrote in Slack. If Elon really focuses on planetary restoration, we're talking the next evolution of Tesla, beyond cars. At the United Nations, a sustainability envoy quoted him during a press briefing. When someone like Elon Musk says Earth needs fixing before we flee it, maybe it's time we all listened. Meanwhile, at home, Leo asked a different question. Why are people mad at you for saying something nice? Elon stirred his tea. Some people don't like change. Even good change. Leo thought for a moment. Maybe they need a hug. Or a nap. Elon smiled. That's not bad advice. The thing was, Elon didn't regret what he said. Not even a little. It was the first time in a long time that he'd spoken without strategy. Without filters. Just the truth that had been building since Leo's question in the playroom. He was still committed to Mars. Still believed in the stars. But now, he wanted to balance the scales. To match ambition with empathy. Progress with presence. Escape with responsibility. He called an impromptu meeting, one that included not just engineers, but climate scientists, urban designers, educators, child psychologists, and even artists. People who'd never been invited into his core vision before. He opened the meeting with a single slide, Earth, version 2.0. This is the next chapter, he said. Not a pivot. A parallel path. One just as important as space. A silence followed. Then cautious nods. Then excitement. Someone asked, "Is this Leo's idea?" Elon grinned. Indirectly. Someone else whispered, "Kid's a genius." Elon shook his head. No. He's just honest. That's rarer. Within a week, an internal task force was assembled. Project Terra Nova. It wasn't a flashy brand. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A bold, messy, idealistic beginning. The mission? Rethink how we treat cities, power, food, water, and, most of all, each other. And not from a billionaire's eye level, but from Leo's. From the height of someone who still saw magic in clouds and fairness in everything. Back home, Leo didn't know anything about task forces or climate accords. He was more concerned about whether bees liked music. I think they'd like violins, he said, watching a YouTube video of string quartets. Because the sound is soft. Elon chuckled. What makes a sound soft? Leo pointed to his chest. If it makes your heart go mm instead of bam. That night, Elon wrote in his private journal, a habit he'd abandoned for years but recently returned to. April 7th. The world is louder than ever, but Leo is like a quiet lighthouse. Maybe being a good father means listening more than speaking. Maybe being a good leader means changing when the truth hits you in the face. Or the heart. Fixing Earth isn't a retreat. It's a deeper challenge. The real one. Mars can wait. Leo reminded me we still have a shot at making this place beautiful. On his desk sat a note Leo had scribbled in crayon the day before. Earth is my favorite planet. Please don't leave her. No punctuation. The "please" was slightly smudged, like he'd thought hard before writing it. Elon read it one more time. Then placed it in a frame. Project Terra Nova begins to take shape. Elon begins visiting real communities, schools, and cities, this time not as a disruptor, but as a student. And Leo tags along. The first stop wasn't a high-tech lab or a Mars simulator. It was a public elementary school in Oakland. No press. No cameras. Just Elon, Leo, and two aides who trailed quietly as the man who once built rockets for fun walked into a classroom that smelled like crayons and chicken nuggets. The kids didn't scream or swarm him. Most didn't even know who he was. A few whispered, "That's the Tesla guy," but Leo was the real star that day. He fit right in, knees scuffed, juice box in hand, eyes wide as he toured the school's rooftop garden. "Daddy," Leo whispered, tugging his sleeve, "they grow strawberries on the roof. Isn't that awesome?" Elon smiled. "Yeah, buddy. That is awesome." Inside, a teacher explained how their school had implemented a zero-waste policy, a community compost system, and solar panels funded by a city grant. Elon asked questions, not to challenge, but to learn. "Do the kids take the compost home?" "Yes, actually. They have compost champions who teach their families. And what's your total annual waste output? Less than half of what it was 5 years ago. He nodded slowly. Genuinely impressed. For once, he wasn't the smartest person in the room. And it felt good. Back in the car, Leo munched apple slices in the back seat while Elon stared out the window. They had less than half the budget of my kid's private school, he murmured, and they're doing more for the planet than most corporations. Leo piped up, because they care. That line settled like a stone in Elon's chest. Not heavy, but grounding. Over the next few weeks, Project Terra Nova rolled into motion. But unlike SpaceX or Tesla, it wasn't fueled by sleek prototypes or flashy launches. It started with listening tours. Elon visiting farming co-ops in Kansas, tribal sustainability initiatives in Arizona, climate-resilient housing communities in New Orleans. Leo came to most of them. He was too young to follow every conversation, but he absorbed the energy. He saw his dad sit in plastic chairs and shake calloused hands and admit, "I don't know enough. Can you teach me?" Sometimes, that was all it took. A simple sentence from the most powerful tech CEO in the world. Can you teach me? In Phoenix, Elon met Maya, a 13-year-old who ran a student-led initiative to plant trees in urban heat zones. She wore a handmade bracelet that said, "No Planet B," and asked Elon a single question. If your son hadn't asked you about Earth, would you still be trying to leave it? Elon hesitated. Then answered honestly. Probably. And that's something I'll have to sit with. Maya nodded. Good. More grown-ups should sit with stuff. Later that night, Elon and Leo sat by a fire pit at a small eco-lodge outside Tucson. Leo was roasting a marshmallow, carefully turning it so it wouldn't burn. Do you think trees talk to each other? He asked. Some scientists think they do, through their roots, Elon replied. They share nutrients. Warn each other. Leo stared into the flames. I think Earth is one big team. But people forgot they're on it. Elon chuckled. You might be 4, but you talk like you're 90. Leo grinned. Then you should really listen to me more. And Elon was. Every decision he made now passed through a new filter. Not just, will this scale? Will this profit? Will this disrupt? But also, will this heal? Will this matter to Leo's world? Would I be proud if he asked me about this 10 years from now? For the first time in decades, Elon felt like he was building something that wasn't meant to escape the mess, but to clean it up. At a Terra Nova brainstorming session, someone proposed a $1 billion climate education campaign. Elon listened quietly, then asked, what if instead of educating kids, we let them educate us? Confused silence. I mean, why not fund student-run design labs in every public school? Let them tell us what Earth should look like. One engineer asked skeptically, you want 4th graders building climate models? Elon looked over at Leo, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor drawing a spaceship that ran on nice thoughts and oranges. He nodded. Yeah. I kinda do. By the end of the month, Terra Nova wasn't just an idea, it was a movement. An open-source climate sandbox. A framework that welcomed underrepresented voices. That focused not just on carbon and data, but on emotion. Storytelling. Legacy. They partnered with indigenous communities, teenage inventors, marine biologists, even children's authors. And through it all, Elon stayed centered by the smallest member of the team. Leo. Leo, who asked things like, what if houses could breathe? Can we make roads out of jelly that bounce instead of break? Do clouds ever get lonely? These weren't distractions. These were portals into better thinking. Leo wasn't just the inspiration. He was the reason Elon stayed human through it all. One night, back in Austin, Elon tucked Leo into bed after a long travel week. Leo yawned and murmured, are we fixing the world now? Elon paused. Then sat down on the edge of the bed. I don't know yet, bud. But we're planting seeds. Leo smiled sleepily. Then we need bees. Elon laughed, brushing the hair from his son's forehead. We'll make sure the bees are okay. And in that moment, nothing, not the stocks, not the headlines, not even Mars, felt more important. The momentum is growing, but not everyone is on board. Elon faces backlash from investors, political figures, and even old allies. As pressure mounts, Leo helps him find clarity when it counts most. Change makes people uncomfortable. Especially when money's involved. In the weeks after Elon publicly redirected his focus toward Earth, the phone calls started piling up, quiet at first, then insistent. We're concerned. What's the ROI on this Terra Nova thing? You're diluting the SpaceX narrative. Our shareholders are nervous. The big names weren't calling to congratulate him on his moral evolution. They were calling to pull him back. One investor said it bluntly. People bought into your dreams of Mars, not mulch and middle schools. Another scoffed, are you a tech visionary or a social worker now? For the first time in a long time, Elon felt cornered. Not by competition. By expectation. The boardroom at SpaceX buzzed with tension during the next quarterly meeting. Charts showed a slight dip in long-term confidence projections. Lines in red. Arrows trending south. We're not saying scrap the Earth plan, one exec said carefully. We're just suggesting, maybe dial it back for now. You want me to stop talking about the planet we live on? Elon asked. No, just, let's reframe. Make Mars the core story again. That's what investors understand. Elon's jaw clenched. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. If investors want someone who only tells them what they already believe, they backed the wrong guy. Silence. Then the CFO cleared his throat. We're just trying to protect your vision, Elon. He looked around the room. Which one? That night, he didn't go back to HQ or home. He drove. No plan. Just miles of dark road through the Texas countryside, windows down, mind loud. He remembered the first time he pitched Tesla. People laughed. He remembered when he said rockets could be reusable. More laughter. He remembered when he tweeted about putting a car in space. Pure ridicule. But he did all of it. And now, suddenly, people were scared because he wanted to protect something. Wasn't that what innovation was about? Creating the future didn't always mean leaving the present behind. Back at home, Leo was asleep, but a note was taped to Elon's bedroom door in shaky crayon handwriting. If you're sad, wake me up and I'll share my blanket. Elon stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the note. Then he quietly opened the door and peeked inside. Leo was snuggled deep in his rocket ship sheets, stuffed fox under his arm. Elon whispered, not tonight, buddy. I've got this. But somehow, it still helped. The next day, Elon met with the Terra Nova team, who, despite mounting pressure, had kept pushing forward. Community gardens, school innovation labs, low-emission building pilots. The work was real. Tangible. But the mood in the room was off. They'd heard the rumors. They'd seen the tweets. Is this over? Someone asked. Elon didn't answer right away. He glanced down at his notebook, where Leo had drawn a picture of Earth with a smiley face and a tiny bandage on it. He looked up. No. It's not over. He paused. Then said with more fire than he'd shown in weeks. You don't kill a good idea because people are scared of it. You double down. Still, not everyone shared his conviction. Some corporate partners backed out. A tech influencer went viral with a video titled, Elon's lost the plot, why Terra Nova is a pipe dream. Comment sections swelled with opinion. Go back to Mars, man. I didn't buy Tesla stock for tree hugging. He's not a genius anymore, he's a dad on a guilt trip. That last one stung more than Elon expected. Because there was truth in it. He was a dad on a guilt trip. And maybe, that was the best reason he'd ever had to lead anything. At dinner, Leo picked at his macaroni, unusually quiet. You okay, bud? Elon asked. Leo nodded. I heard someone on the radio say you're ruining things. Elon blinked. Where'd you hear that? Mrs. Carla forgot to turn the radio off in the carpool. Elon sighed. That's not true. But some people are upset because I'm changing how I do things. Leo looked up. Why are they mad if you're helping? Because helping doesn't always make money right away. Leo furrowed his brows. But it makes things better. Elon leaned in. Exactly. Leo thought for a second, then smiled. Then they'll catch up. The next morning, Elon made a decision. Not one driven by market trends or political risk. But one driven by clarity. Leo's kind of clarity. He went live on X. No filters. No PR team. Just him, in a hoodie, sitting at his kitchen table. Some of you think I've gone soft. That I'm off mission. That fixing Earth means giving up on Mars. You're wrong. The same drive that got us to orbit should be used to restore the ground we came from. If that makes me a dad on a guilt trip, then good. More dads should take trips like that. Hashtag Terranova continues. The clip went viral. Again. But this time, something shifted. The top comment wasn't from a venture capitalist. It was from a fourth-grade teacher in Minneapolis. My students watched this in class today. They said, maybe Earth can still win. That night, Leo climbed onto Elon's lap after dinner. Did you fix it yet? He asked. Not yet, Elon said, wrapping his arms around him. But I think we scared the people who broke it. Leo giggled. Good. Make them clean it up. Elon laughed, resting his chin on his son's head. Working on it, buddy. One piece at a time. It felt like one of the old days. A press event. A reveal. Anticipation humming in the air. But this wasn't a Tesla showroom or a SpaceX hangar. This was the Austin Civic Center, transformed overnight into a living model of what Elon now called the regenerative future. Solar vines twisted up steel trusses. Living moss walls soaked in soft lighting. A kid-sized urban farm sat next to an interactive energy station that glowed when touched. It wasn't sleek, it was alive. The press was skeptical. The public, curious. Terra Nova had made headlines, sure, but this? This was Elon Musk's first real test of his new vision. And no one knew what to expect. They especially didn't expect what happened next. The lights dimmed. A giant screen lit up, but instead of Elon's face, it was a child's drawing of Earth, complete with smiley sun, rainbows, and a tree that said, "Thank you." Then a voice. "This is Earth. She needs a little help right now. But she's still really nice." The crowd laughed, softly at first, then louder as a small figure walked on stage next to Elon. Leo. Wearing his favorite hoodie, a cartoon bee with sunglasses, and a serious expression, like he'd been preparing for this moment since the sandbox. Elon knelt beside him at the podium. I figured it's only fair to let the person who started all this help explain it. Leo cleared his throat. Hi. I'm Leo. I asked my dad why we were trying to go to Mars if we didn't fix this planet yet. People chuckled again, some awkwardly. But they were listening. I think Earth is special. Because it has bees and friends and rivers and clouds that look like puppies. I don't want to leave her. Elon stood, resting a hand gently on his son's shoulder. That question changed everything for me. Then the screen behind them lit up with the words. Project Terra Nova, Phase 1, Planet School. Elon continued, today, we're launching something new. Not a rocket. Not a car. A school system. Designed by scientists, teachers, artists, and, yes, kids. The presentation was brief by Elon's standards. A national initiative to transform underfunded schools into community climate innovation hubs. With rooftop gardens. DIY solar projects. Nature-first curriculum. And most importantly, student-led design thinking. Instead of teaching kids how the world works, Elon said, we'll ask them how they want it to work. It wasn't just a gesture. It came with $2 billion in funding, committed by Elon and a coalition of partners, some surprised, others inspired by his sharp pivot. The launch wasn't perfect. Some slides glitched. Leo got distracted mid-sentence and started describing a dream he had about a jellyfish that ran for president. But no one cared. Because this wasn't a spectacle. It was sincere. The response was, electric. Within hours, #PlanetSchool was trending. Teachers across the country uploaded videos of their classrooms cheering. Parents emailed Terra Nova asking how to bring the program to their districts. Even late-night hosts, usually quick to roast Elon, softened. One said, I still think he's a mad scientist, but now he's a mad scientist who actually listens to his kid. That's kinda beautiful. Backstage, Leo sat cross-legged with a juice box and a cookie, totally unfazed by the crowd of flashing cameras outside. Elon knelt beside him. You did amazing, bud. Leo shrugged. I just said the true thing. That's the hardest part, Elon said. Most grown-ups forget how. Leo smiled. You didn't forget. You just got busy. Elon blinked. That one hit hard. Again. Then Leo added, but now you're not too busy. And just like that, Elon knew, this launch mattered more than any rocket he'd ever built. 2 weeks later, the first Planet School pilot site opened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A small school with a cracked basketball court and a failing HVAC system. By the end of the month, they had a rooftop greenhouse, a student-led compost club, and one sixth grader who designed an app that tracked energy use by classroom. Reporters visited. They expected tech. Instead, they found kids full of agency. When asked why they thought Elon Musk was backing their school, one 10-year-old said. Because we asked the same question his kid did. And now we're gonna answer it. At home, Elon kept a whiteboard in his study. One side listed his usual obsessions. Neuralink updates. Starship test dates. AI safety regulations. But the other side had something new. Leo's ideas. Bee hotel. Water that sings when it's clean. Plastic that turns into flowers. Cities with slide tunnels. Ask grandma's stuff before building big stuff. Elon didn't erase that side. Not ever. Because maybe the real future wasn't just invented. Maybe it was imagined, one question at a time, by people still innocent enough to wonder without cynicism. That night, Elon tucked Leo into bed after a long day of video calls and news interviews. Leo yawned. Did people like our new idea? They did, Elon said, brushing hair from his forehead. A lot. Leo nodded. Good. But they still have to help, too. Not just clap. Elon laughed softly. That's true. Can I quote you on that? What's quote mean? It means I'll say you said it. Leo rolled over, eyes half shut. Then yeah. But make sure you say it with the voice I used. Elon smiled. Deal. When you've spent years changing the world, it's easy to forget the people who helped build it with you. But every now and then, life forces you to revisit those relationships. It was a Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. Elon was at the Terra Nova headquarters, finalizing the plans for the next stage of the school initiative, when his assistant passed him the call. "It's Greg," she said. Greg was more than an old friend. He was one of the first investors in SpaceX, the one who had called Elon crazy but then watched in awe as SpaceX became the game-changer it was today. Greg had been a mentor, a partner in crime, and someone who had shared both victories and struggles in the business world. They hadn't spoken much since the launch of Terra Nova. Elon hesitated for a moment before answering. "Greg, it's been a while." "Yeah, it has." Greg's voice was familiar but edged with something else. "I saw the news, Elon. You're really pushing this whole save the planet thing now, huh?" Elon chuckled, but it felt more strained than usual. "You could say that. Look, I get it," Greg continued, his tone softer now. "You've got kids. You want to leave them something better. But come on, this isn't you. You're a space guy. You're a future guy. You don't get there by playing the political game here on Earth." Elon leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the desk as he listened. "You're saying I'm losing focus?" "I'm saying you've got a lot of focus, too much on something that doesn't make sense, especially now. We both know the world's been burning for decades. If we wanted to fix this place, we'd have done it by now." Elon's chest tightened. He'd heard these arguments before. A part of him even agreed. People had been trying to fix things for ages, but it never seemed to stick. Progress always felt like it was crawling at a snail's pace. "I don't think it's too late, Greg. Maybe we've been doing it wrong." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "And what if you're wrong, Elon? What if you waste your time on Earth and then miss the chance to get humanity to the stars? What if this whole thing is just a distraction?" Elon gritted his teeth. "I'm not wasting anything. This is the future. It's about giving the next generation something they can believe in. That's what Mars was always about, being a backup plan. But we can't abandon Earth just because it's messy." Greg sighed. "I get it. But I'm just not sure you're seeing the whole picture. Remember, I believed in you when no one else did. But I also believed in the long-term game, Elon. The one where we build the future. Not get bogged down by the present." Elon stared out the window, his thoughts racing. He knew Greg's concerns weren't unfounded. The stakes were high. Mars was the dream, but, was Earth really the distraction, or was it part of the path forward? Had he lost sight of the bigger picture? "I hear you," Elon said finally. "I'm not backing down, though. I've got to see this through." Another long silence before Greg replied, more gently, "I hope you know what you're doing, Elon. Because I can't follow you if you're just chasing a pipe dream." With that, the call ended. The conversation left Elon unsettled. He walked around his office for a while, thoughts swirling. Greg's words hit home. There was a part of him that knew Mars was the ultimate goal, the beacon that would pull humanity out of its self-destructive cycle. But what if the mission on Earth wasn't just a diversion? What if this new path was part of the same vision he had always had? A future where humanity was resilient, not just on Mars, but here too. He couldn't shake the thought that something bigger was happening now. Not just on a grand scale, but in his own life. That night, Elon was sitting in his study, reviewing some reports when the door creaked open. Leo poked his head inside. "Dad?" Elon looked up from his screen. "What's up, buddy?" Leo walked in, holding his stuffed fox. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course. You know you can ask me anything." Leo sat on the edge of the chair. "You're doing the right thing, right?" Elon froze. The question was simple, but it felt like a weight on his shoulders. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. Leo shrugged. "I don't know. You always tell me that the world's a mess, but you can make it better. But I don't want you to be sad about it. I just want you to be happy. Elon's heart sank. The honesty in Leo's words felt like a punch to the gut. His son wasn't just looking for reassurance, he was looking for truth. And in that moment, Elon realized that Leo had been watching him, not just for answers about the world, but for answers about himself. I'm not sad, Leo, he said, swallowing hard. I'm trying to make things better. And sometimes, it's hard. But that doesn't mean I'm not doing the right thing. Leo's brow furrowed. But are you sure? Elon took a deep breath. I'm sure. And you know what? I think I've just got to trust that the right people will see it. Even if it takes time. Leo smiled and climbed into Elon's lap. Good. Because I think you're doing great. Just like the bees. Elon smiled, holding Leo close. Like the bees, huh? Yeah. They make honey, even if no one knows how it works. They just do it. Elon chuckled softly. All right, little man. We'll do our part, too. Like the bees. The next day, Elon made a decision. He didn't call Greg or any of his other business associates. Instead, he sent a message to the Terra Nova team. We're moving forward. But this isn't just about launching the next big thing. It's about building the kind of future that people want to be part of. He didn't need a Mars mission to prove he was right. He needed to prove that Earth was worth fighting for, not as a distraction, but as part of the very foundation that would allow humanity to thrive. Later that evening, as Elon sat at the dinner table with Leo, he felt a strange sense of peace. Greg's concerns were still there, lingering in the back of his mind. But Leo had reminded him of something important, that change didn't always have to be grand to matter. Sometimes, the most significant shift started with a single, simple question. And that was enough. It wasn't just the headlines that were shifting. It was the world around him. People were starting to listen. Even his critics were beginning to soften. But with every success came a new challenge, a new question, and more pressure than ever to prove that this wasn't some fleeting ideal. It was the future. Elon had barely settled into his routine when the first wave hit. It came from an old contact, someone he'd known since the early days of Tesla. Natalie Tran, one of the most prominent environmental activists in the US, had reached out, requesting a meeting. Elon had always respected her. She was driven, passionate, and relentless. And unlike most environmentalists, she didn't just talk, she acted. He wasn't sure what she wanted, but he suspected it wasn't a friendly chat. Natalie showed up at Terra Nova's headquarters the next day. She wasn't interested in small talk. She got straight to the point, her voice firm. Elon, I've been watching everything you've been doing with Terra Nova, she started. And I'll be honest, I'm intrigued. But I also have my doubts. Elon leaned forward. I'm listening. I see what you're doing, teaching kids about sustainability, giving them the tools to rethink the world. But how are you going to scale this? I've been working on this for years, and one thing I know for sure is that change doesn't happen overnight. The world needs urgent action, not another feel-good initiative. Elon nodded. He had expected criticism from some corners, but this was different. She was right, real change required action. And the clock was ticking. But that was exactly why he was pushing forward with Terra Nova. I don't disagree with you, he said. That's why we're already working on phase 2. We're not just talking about change, we're giving people the tools to act on it now. Our goal isn't just education, it's to show communities how they can make a real difference in their own neighborhoods, starting today. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Phase 2. You think this is scalable? I'm sure of it. It's not just about making green energy cool. It's about making it necessary. People are looking for solutions they can feel connected to. And if we can bring this to enough schools, to enough communities, we'll get there. Natalie crossed her arms. I admire your optimism, Elon. But optimism alone won't save us. What's your plan to get policy leaders on board? What are you going to do about the corporations that are blocking progress at every turn? Elon leaned back in his chair, thinking. We've already started those conversations. Policy changes take time, yes. But if we can show that this kind of grassroots innovation is driving real, measurable change in communities, we'll force the hand of policymakers. She still didn't seem entirely convinced. And what about the companies that are profiting off environmental destruction? How do you plan to convince them to play nice? Elon smiled slightly. I plan to show them that the future of business is sustainability. Once they see that this is where the world is headed, they'll either adapt or get left behind. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but Natalie's skepticism was the catalyst Elon needed. He knew she wasn't going to just sit back and cheer him on, she'd hold his feet to the fire, and that was exactly the kind of challenge he needed. But there was another pressure building too. Elon had always prided himself on being able to handle stress, to juggle multiple projects, and still make time for his family. But lately, it felt like the weight of the world was growing heavier. The days seemed to blend together, filled with long meetings, negotiations, and strategies to ensure that Terra Nova's mission wasn't just a temporary burst of goodwill, it had to be a lasting movement. One evening, as he sat in his office, staring at the whiteboard with Leo's ideas on one side and his own goals on the other, he felt a moment of doubt creeping in. Am I spreading myself too thin? He wondered aloud. Am I really making the right choices? It was then that his phone rang again, this time an unexpected number. Hello. Elon answered. Hey, it's Greg. Elon rubbed his forehead. What's up? I've been thinking about our last conversation, Greg said, and I'm still not convinced you've got it all figured out. You're taking on a lot of responsibility with Terra Nova, Elon. Are you sure you're not just trying to save the world to avoid the bigger question? Elon's grip on the phone tightened. What question? The question of whether you can really balance everything, Greg continued. Space, Earth, your family, are you spreading yourself too thin? The best innovators focus on one thing, and right now, you're chasing a million different dreams. Elon swallowed hard. I can do this, Greg. I'm not saying you can't. But just make sure you're not running from something. Sometimes, the hardest thing is admitting when you've made a mistake. The call ended with a heavy silence. Elon didn't want to admit it, but Greg's words struck a chord. Maybe he wasn't just pushing for a better future. Maybe he was running from the very thing that had made him successful in the first place, his own fear of failure. But just as quickly as the thought came, he pushed it away. Failure wasn't an option. Not now. The next morning, Elon took a deep breath and walked into a new round of meetings. He had a clear sense of purpose, but he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed the support of those around him, and most importantly, he needed to believe in the power of small actions creating big changes. As the meeting started, Elon glanced around the room at the team members who had gathered to help bring Terra Nova to life. They weren't just colleagues, they were allies in the truest sense. And that made all the difference. Leo's voice echoed in his head, I think you're doing great. Just like the bees. With that thought, Elon smiled. Maybe the bees didn't have all the answers, but they kept going anyway. And if they could do it, so could he. Elon faces unexpected support and growing momentum for Terra Nova. But just as things start to take off, a new challenge threatens to derail everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The world had a way of surprising you, often when you least expected it. And Elon Musk was beginning to realize that despite all the preparation, despite all the technology, and the strategy, sometimes the most important factor was momentum. It had been a month since the meeting with Natalie, and a lot had changed. The Terra Nova initiative was gaining more attention than ever. Schools were starting to adopt the sustainability curriculum, and even local governments were beginning to take notice. Something in the air had shifted, and it felt like people were hungry for change. Elon sat in his office, staring at the latest data on Terra Nova's outreach. The numbers were promising, schools in over 20 states had signed on, and the program was expanding faster than expected. Teachers were eager, parents were supportive, and the kids. They were the real driving force. They were passionate about changing the world, and they were starting to understand that they could actually do it. The success felt good, but Elon knew this was just the beginning. There was so much more to be done. And yet, he couldn't ignore the small victories. Leo's school had just been selected as one of the model schools for Terra Nova's pilot program. It was a win. A small win, but a significant one. As the program took root in his son's school, it felt like a personal validation. Elon leaned back in his chair, thinking about how far things had come. In the early days of SpaceX, he'd had a vision, but it wasn't without its doubts. There had been so many days when failure seemed inevitable, when the financial stakes were too high, and when the tech just didn't seem ready. But he'd always believed that small wins could turn into big victories. That afternoon, Elon visited Leo's school. He wanted to see the impact for himself, how the students were engaging with the Terra Nova curriculum, how the sustainability lessons were taking shape. It wasn't just about seeing numbers on a screen anymore, it was about feeling the energy firsthand. As he walked into the classroom, a group of kids were gathered around a table, working on a project. They were designing a model of an energy-efficient city. The classroom was buzzing with excitement, and Leo's teacher, Ms. Edwards, caught Elon's eye and gave him a warm smile. "Elon. I'm so glad you could visit today." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Elon replied, looking over the students' work. "How's it going?" Ms. Edwards gestured to the board, where the kids had mapped out solar panels, green spaces, and water conservation systems. "The kids are really taking to it. They're starting to understand how all the little pieces fit together." Elon's heart swelled with pride. It was working. They were actually building something that mattered. He glanced over at Leo, who was deep in discussion with his classmates about how to reduce energy consumption in their hypothetical city. "You're doing great, buddy," Elon said, ruffling Leo's hair. Leo looked up and beamed. "We're going to make it the best city ever, Dad. It's going to be green, and everyone will help." Elon couldn't help but smile. It was a vision he'd longed to see for the future, a future where the next generation didn't just accept the world as it was but actively worked to improve it. But just as things seemed to be on the up and up, an email from his assistant interrupted his thoughts. It was a message from one of his Terra Nova advisors, marking a sudden, unexpected issue. A major corporation, one of the biggest fossil fuel companies in the world, had threatened legal action against Terra Nova. They claimed that the educational initiative was spreading misleading information about energy, accusing them of influencing young minds with anti-business propaganda. The email contained a draft of the lawsuit, which was aimed directly at the program's content. Elon read it over twice, a growing sense of disbelief washing over him. This wasn't just an attempt to slow progress, it was a full-on assault to stifle a movement that threatened their bottom line. He quickly dialed his lawyer. "We need to meet. This thing is bigger than I thought." Later that day, Elon sat across from his legal team in the conference room. The lawsuit was real, and it was serious. The company had deep pockets and the power to tie Terra Nova up in court for years. The legal jargon was complex, but Elon was already thinking a step ahead. "We have two options," his lead counsel said. "We can either settle and make some compromises to avoid prolonged litigation, or we can fight it. But if we fight, expect a prolonged battle. They won't back down easily." Elon steepled his fingers and leaned forward. "We're not backing down." The room fell silent as his team processed his words. Elon knew this wasn't going to be easy. They had the support of teachers, students, and parents, but this corporation had the ability to shape public opinion. They had the resources to drown out any voices that opposed them. But this was the moment when Terra Nova would be tested in a way it never had been before. I want to counter their narrative, Elon said, his voice steady. We don't just have to fight back in the courts, we need to turn this into a movement. We need to go public, make it clear what they're doing, and why it matters. His team nodded. They knew that Elon wasn't just talking about winning a legal battle. He was talking about winning the hearts and minds of the public. The next day, Elon addressed the media. In front of a live audience, he didn't just talk about Terra Nova's mission, he talked about the responsibility of corporations to help the planet, not destroy it. He challenged the fossil fuel giant, asking why they were so determined to block educational initiatives aimed at sustainability. We are living in a world where corporations have become too powerful, Elon said, his voice unwavering. It's time for us to step up, to fight for a future that is not just about profit, but about people. This is bigger than any company. This is about creating a world that our children can inherit, a world that works for everyone. The response was immediate. Support flooded in from environmental groups, teachers, parents, and even children. The narrative had shifted. What had been a legal threat was now a rallying cry. The public wasn't just rallying behind Elon, they were rallying behind their own futures. The power of small wins had never been clearer. The victory over that day's battle was far from certain, but one thing was undeniable, Terra Nova wasn't just a program. It was a movement. Elon stood up from his desk, his fingers tapping nervously on the edge. But as he glanced at the messages of support flooding in, a wave of confidence swept over him. This was why he fought. This was why he had to push forward, no matter the cost. And as he turned to leave the office, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Leo. Dad, we did it. We made the best city ever. Can't wait for you to see it. Elon smiled. One small win at a time. It wasn't long before Elon realized that winning the battle wasn't the same as winning the war. His comments had gone viral, drawing international attention, but the fossil fuel giant he had challenged wasn't going to go down easily. They had underestimated the power of public opinion, but now, they were coming at him with everything they had. The lawsuit was just the beginning. Elon stood in front of a packed boardroom, the morning sunlight filtering through the windows. His team, including his closest advisors, was gathered around the table, a mix of exhaustion and determination on their faces. The battle with the fossil fuel corporation had escalated quickly, and now it was a fight on multiple fronts. Here's where we stand, his legal team's lead counsel, Sam, said, his tone grim. The company has hired an army of PR specialists to smear Terra Nova. They're framing the narrative that our program is brainwashing children with false claims about energy. They're pulling every lever they can to undermine the program's credibility. Elon frowned, gripping the edge of the table. They're playing dirty. What's the counter? We've already started pushing back through media channels. The problem is that the attacks are getting traction, especially with certain conservative groups who are framing this as corporate overreach, Sam explained. But we need a bigger strategy. They're fighting us on the legal front, the media front, and now it seems they're trying to influence politicians. Elon had known this day would come. They were fighting against some of the most powerful interests in the world, but he didn't back down from challenges. The question was, how could he fight back without losing everything he had worked for? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Come in, Elon said, his voice sharp. It was Leo's teacher, Ms. Edwards. She looked concerned as she stepped into the room, holding a tablet in her hand. Elon, I think you need to see this, she said, passing him the tablet. The screen displayed a news headline, Local Schools Pull Out of Terra Nova After Pressure from Corporate Lobbyists. Beneath the headline were pictures of students from various schools, protesting their involvement with the program. In the story, it was clear that some schools had been coerced into reversing their support. Elon clenched his jaw, frustration boiling beneath the surface. The corporate lobby was not just trying to discredit them, they were trying to tear the whole program apart, piece by piece. That night, as Elon sat alone in his office, the weight of the situation began to settle in. He had spent years building up his companies, each one a response to the world's biggest problems, but now he was faced with a new kind of enemy. It wasn't just the obstacles of technology or the logistical nightmares of managing multiple ventures, it was a coordinated assault, designed to wear him down and stop Terra Nova in its tracks. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city skyline. He was used to obstacles, used to the long hours and sleepless nights that came with running SpaceX and Tesla. But this felt different. This wasn't just about technology or innovation, this was about changing the way people thought. And that kind of transformation was dangerous to the status quo. His phone buzzed on his desk. He glanced at the message. It was from Greg. "Elon, I know you're taking a hit right now, but you're fighting the right fight. Don't lose sight of what you're doing. Think about Leo. Think about the future." It was a simple message, but it hit hard. Elon had always been a visionary. His motivations had always been bigger than business. But in that moment, he thought about Leo, and about the world he wanted his son to grow up in, a world that was different, better, and sustainable. His mind shifted back to the bigger picture. This wasn't just a personal mission. It wasn't about him, it was about the future of humanity. The world needed Terra Nova to succeed, and he wasn't going to let it fail, not on his watch. The next morning, he called a meeting with his closest advisors. "We need to change the narrative," he said, pacing the room. "We've been reacting to their attacks. It's time we took control of the story." "What do you have in mind?" Sam asked. Elon turned toward him, his eyes burning with determination. "We start speaking directly to the public. We need a major media push. A campaign that shows the world that this isn't just about kids in classrooms, it's about the future we're leaving behind. We need to show them who the real villains are." His team nodded, already beginning to make plans. Elon wasn't just going to play defense, he was going to turn the tables. That afternoon, Elon appeared on one of the largest news networks, facing a panel of journalists. The interview was tense, with the anchors trying to get him to answer tough questions about the lawsuit and the political pressure he was facing. "You're in the middle of a legal battle, and now we have protests from parents and teachers questioning your program's effectiveness," one anchor said. "What's your response to that?" Elon took a breath, steadying himself. "My response is simple. We're not here to please the corporations that are profiting off the destruction of the environment. We're here to give our children a future, one that isn't controlled by fossil fuels, one that's built on sustainable energy and innovation. This program isn't about what's easy, it's about what's necessary." The interviewer raised an eyebrow. "But you're taking on some very powerful forces. Is there any concern that you could lose this battle?" Elon paused, looking directly into the camera. "The real question is, what happens if we don't fight? What happens if we let the corporations win? I won't let the next generation suffer because we were too afraid to act. This is about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." The interview went viral. Elon's words struck a chord with millions of people. His direct approach, his unwavering commitment to the cause, it was a rallying cry for everyone who felt helpless against the corporate giants holding the world back. But just as things started to look promising, the storm clouds began to gather. In the background, the fossil fuel company wasn't just targeting him with legal threats, they were mobilizing a network of allies, using their influence to quietly sabotage the progress that Terra Nova had made. As the days passed, Elon found himself in an all-out war. Not just a legal war, but a war for the future. And it wasn't just his future, it was the future of every child who was learning what it meant to create a more sustainable world. Elon stared at the latest report from his team, showing the increasing number of schools pulling out of the program. He couldn't help but feel the weight of their decisions, knowing that the fight ahead was far from over. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. It was time to build the storm, and ride it out. The storm Elon had been weathering felt relentless. As Terra Nova continued to face increasing pressure from corporate giants, politicians, and critics, it seemed like every day brought a new obstacle. Public opinion was still on his side, but the media attacks and legal threats were starting to take their toll. What made things even more complicated was the growing division within his own ranks. Not everyone on his team was as convinced of Terra Nova's future as he was. Some had started questioning the risks involved. The idea of challenging such powerful forces, especially the fossil fuel industry, was beginning to look like an insurmountable battle. Elon stood alone on the rooftop of the SpaceX headquarters, gazing at the vast expanse of the stars. It was a quiet moment, but the weight of the world hung heavy on his shoulders. He thought about the path he had taken to get here. The early days of SpaceX, when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, and how every failure had led to the one success that finally proved they could send rockets to space. It had been a journey filled with doubt and hardship, but that success had unlocked something bigger. And Terra Nova, the sustainability initiative, was no different. This time, however, it wasn't just about building rockets or electric cars. This was about reshaping the future of humanity itself. Elon's phone buzzed in his pocket, dragging him back to the present. It was a message from Greg. "Elon, it's happening. We've got a chance to turn this around." Elon quickly tapped out a reply. "What's going on? Let's talk." A few minutes later, Greg called. "Elon," Greg's voice was urgent. "I've got something that could change everything. But it's risky. I'm talking about going directly after the heart of the fossil fuel industry. If we do this right, we could end the battle for good." Elon felt a spark of interest. "What are you thinking?" Greg was quiet for a moment. "It's not about playing their game anymore. We go straight for their influence. We expose everything, the corruption, the lobbyist networks, the way they've been controlling politics and education for decades. We go full transparency." Elon felt his pulse quicken. "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" "We've got the data," Greg continued. "The leaks, the financial ties, the hidden meetings, they're all out there. All we have to do is connect the dots. We'll make sure the public sees it." Elon's mind raced. This was bold, unprecedented, even. But it felt right. If they could pull this off, it would not only change the tide of the battle, but it could force a global reckoning. "Let's do it," Elon said, his voice firm. Over the next few days, Elon and his team worked tirelessly, digging into the network of corporate influence behind the fossil fuel industry. They unearthed documents, insider accounts, and financial records that painted a damning picture. The amount of information they had was overwhelming: leaked reports from board meetings, the politicians they had bribed, and the influence they had peddled behind the scenes. It was the kind of information that could bring down empires. And if Elon could expose it to the world, it could tip the balance in favor of Terra Nova and its vision for a sustainable future. But the risk was enormous. If the fossil fuel industry got wind of what they were doing, they would come after them with everything they had. 1 week later, Elon stood before a live audience in New York City. The press conference had been planned for days, but the weight of what he was about to unveil made his hands shake slightly. He'd fought battles in the past, battles that had pushed him to his limits, but this was different. This wasn't just about his companies. This was about the future of the planet. He took a deep breath as he stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent, the cameras flashing in unison. "Elon Musk," the moderator announced. "Founder of SpaceX and Tesla, and now, leader of the Terra Nova initiative." Elon gave a small nod before addressing the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Today, I'm here not just to talk about Terra Nova or sustainable energy. Today, I'm here to expose something much bigger. What I'm about to share with you isn't just about one company, or one issue. It's about the systems that have been in place for decades, systems designed to keep us from creating a better future." He paused, glancing at the sea of faces before him. What I'm about to show you is the truth. The truth about how a small group of powerful corporations has been manipulating our governments, our education systems, and even our media to preserve a status quo that's destroying the planet. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Journalists shifted in their seats, trying to process what he was saying. I've got the documents, the emails, the financial records, Elon continued. And I'm releasing them to the public today. This is the truth about how they've been stifling innovation, silencing activists, and blocking any efforts to build a sustainable future. This isn't just a fight for Terra Nova, this is a fight for the future of humanity. He handed the floor to his legal team, who began presenting the evidence, leaked reports, transcripts, and financial documents showing the extensive web of influence the fossil fuel companies had used to control politics and delay the transition to renewable energy. As the evidence unfolded on the screen behind them, the room grew silent. The truth was undeniable. Back in his office that night, Elon stared at the flood of reactions from the press and social media. It was like a bomb had gone off. News outlets around the world were covering the revelations, with headlines calling it the greatest corporate scandal of the century. The support poured in from unexpected places: activists, politicians, even environmental groups who had once been critical of his approach. It seemed that people were finally waking up to the truth. But Elon knew this was just the beginning. The fossil fuel industry wasn't going to let this go quietly. They would retaliate, but now, they were exposed. Elon felt a sense of relief, but also a growing sense of urgency. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, he received a message from Leo. "Dad, you did it. The world knows now. I'm proud of you." Elon smiled. In that moment, he felt the weight of his son's words more than anything else. This wasn't just about winning, it was about leaving a legacy, one that would make the world a better place for generations to come. It didn't take long for the backlash to hit. Within hours of Elon's press conference, the fossil fuel industry swung into action, deploying their vast network of lawyers, PR teams, and political allies to fight back. What had once been a hidden, shadowy manipulation of the global system was now out in the open, and they weren't about to let it crumble without a fight. Elon sat in his office late into the night, scrolling through the flood of news reports, social media posts, and messages from his team. Some of it was supportive, many were applauding his courage, calling it the most important corporate transparency effort of the century. Others, however, were coming for his head. The corporate smear machine was in full swing. On TV screens across the country, talking heads were grilling him. They were calling him a disruptor, gone too far, a billionaire with an agenda to tear down the system. The oil and gas industry wasn't just threatening him, they were actively trying to turn public opinion against him. In the days following the revelation, media outlets began reporting that certain government officials were privately expressing concerns about the unprecedented attack on a key industry. Politicians tied to fossil fuel donations were starting to speak out, calling for investigations into Elon's companies. "What's the word from Washington?" Elon asked, turning to his lead strategist, Maria, who had just walked in. Maria sighed. "It's bad. We've got a few politicians who are with us, but a lot of the ones connected to big oil are now pushing hard for regulations against Terra Nova and SpaceX. There's talk of hearings, investigations, even possible criminal charges against you for malicious interference." Elon's jaw tightened. "We knew this was coming." Maria nodded. "The lawsuits are already being filed. They're accusing you of defamation, of spreading misinformation. Some of the lawyers are even hinting at possible sanctions for your companies." Elon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. This was the price of transparency. He'd anticipated resistance, but the sheer scale of the counterattack caught him off guard. These weren't just corporate lawyers or media pundits, these were powerful entities with deep political influence. The media attacks were relentless. The next morning, a well-known anchor on one of the major news networks boldly declared, "Elon Musk's public takedown of the fossil fuel industry is nothing short of dangerous. His reckless actions are destabilizing the market and putting thousands of jobs at risk. It's a shame that a man with so much power would put his ego before the good of the nation. On social media, it wasn't much better. Hashtags like hashtag #MuskMustGo and hashtag #FossilFuelTruth were trending across platforms. The smear campaigns had grown so sophisticated that they started to influence people who had once supported him. There were calls for boycotts of SpaceX, Tesla, and even the Terra Nova program. It wasn't just public opinion at stake anymore, it was his entire empire. His phone buzzed with notifications, but this time, it wasn't a message from Greg or one of his advisors. It was Leo. "Dad, what's happening? Are you okay?" Elon's heart sank. He quickly typed back a response. "I'm fine, buddy. Just a lot of work to do right now. You don't need to worry." But even as he typed the words, he knew the weight of it was different this time. He wasn't just fighting for innovation anymore. He was fighting for the future of his family and for the world Leo would inherit. And the pressure on his shoulders was starting to feel overwhelming. By the afternoon, things took a turn for the worse. One of Elon's top legal advisors, Sam, called him in a panic. "Elon, we've got a major problem," Sam said, his voice shaky. "The SEC is getting involved. They've issued subpoenas for SpaceX and Tesla over the way Terra Nova was funded. They're calling it illegal interference in the market." Elon felt his blood run cold. The Securities and Exchange Commission was the last thing he wanted to deal with right now. If they investigated, it could open a massive can of worms, potentially damaging both SpaceX and Tesla, and jeopardizing the future of Terra Nova. The risk to his companies, and his credibility, was now very real. "I'll need everything you've got," Elon said through gritted teeth. "We're going to have to fight this." As the days went by, Elon found himself in the midst of an all-out war. His team worked around the clock to address the legal issues and push back against the media firestorm. He knew they couldn't let up, but the pressure was mounting. Then, one evening, as Elon walked out of a meeting with his legal team, he spotted a familiar face in the hallway, Greg. He was looking uncharacteristically tense. "Elon, we've got a problem," Greg said, his voice low. "I just received a call from one of our investors. They're pulling out. And they're not the only ones." Elon's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They're saying the risk has become too high. They're pulling their funding from Terra Nova, and if the lawsuits keep piling up, we're going to lose more. There's talk that other investors might follow suit," Greg explained. Elon took a moment to absorb the weight of what Greg was saying. It wasn't just the external forces, the corporate opposition, the media attacks. The cracks were starting to show in his own foundation. "Elon, you have to understand, if we lose these investors, Terra Nova won't survive," Greg continued. "I know you believe in this mission, but at what point do we say enough is enough?" Elon's thoughts raced. This was the turning point. He could fight. Or he could fold. For a moment, he thought of Leo, of the future he wanted to build. And then, he made his decision. "We're not folding," Elon said, his voice resolute. "We've come this far. We're going to push through. Whatever it takes." That night, as Elon lay in bed, he thought about everything that had led to this moment. He wasn't just fighting for business anymore. He was fighting for the future. He had always been willing to take risks, he had started from nothing, built empires from the ground up, defied the odds to make space travel a reality. But this battle felt different. This was more than just innovation. This was about survival. Not just for him, but for the planet. He thought about Leo again. His son's words echoed in his mind, "Dad, you did it. The world knows now." Elon had no choice but to fight. The weight of the world pressed down on Elon like an immovable force. Each day that passed felt like a battlefield, and every decision he made seemed to add another layer to the pressure. Investors were pulling out, public opinion was shifting, and the fossil fuel giants were digging in their heels, determined to crush him and Terra Nova for good. But even as the walls closed in, Elon knew that the fight was far from over. In fact, in the quiet corners of his mind, something told him that they were on the verge of a breakthrough. A turning point that could change everything. It was late one night, in the small hours of the morning, when Elon sat hunched over a stack of legal documents in his private office at SpaceX. The noise of his team working around the clock in the building had subsided, and the office felt unusually still. But his mind raced at 1,000 miles per hour. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Greg. "Elon, I've got something. Something big. We might have a way to turn the tide, but it's going to be risky. We need your approval." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Every fiber of his being knew that this was the moment, the tipping point. If this was the breakthrough he had been hoping for, it could shift the battle in their favor. He typed back, his fingers trembling slightly. "What's the plan?" Greg's reply came swiftly. "We've been digging into the financial side of the fossil fuel industry's web. We've found a major vulnerability, an international investment group tied directly to some of the biggest players in big oil. They're heavily invested in renewable energy, but their holdings are tied up in fossil fuels. If we can expose their hypocrisy and make it public, it could trigger a massive crisis of confidence in the entire industry. Investors will bail. Public trust will collapse. It's the lever we need." Elon sat back, his mind whirring. It was genius. If they could pull this off, it would not only expose the hypocrisy of the fossil fuel giants, it would show that they were using renewable energy as a smokescreen while secretly propping up the very industries they claimed to oppose. But there was a catch. The risk involved was enormous. Exposing this investment group could lead to an all-out financial collapse for both the fossil fuel industry and their renewable energy partners. It could also put Terra Nova in the crosshairs, making them an even bigger target. Still, the stakes were too high to ignore. If this information fell into the right hands, it could be the spark that would ignite the global shift they needed. Elon knew this was his chance. There would be no going back after this. He texted Greg back. "Do it. Go public with it. We don't have time to waste." The next 48 hours were a blur. Greg and his team worked feverishly, compiling the evidence and preparing it for release. Elon remained holed up in his office, constantly checking in on their progress, making sure every detail was in place. When the moment finally arrived, the world would be watching. The following morning, as the sun barely rose over the horizon, Elon made his way to a press conference. This wasn't just any press conference, it was his last chance to take control of the narrative. If he didn't act now, the financial pressure would continue to mount, and Terra Nova might not survive. The media room was packed with reporters, cameras set up, microphones ready to capture the next big moment. Elon took a deep breath as he walked up to the podium, his thoughts swirling. He knew the industry would be watching, waiting for him to slip up. But he couldn't afford to hesitate. Not anymore. "Thank you all for coming," Elon began, his voice steady. "Today, I'm here not to talk about the future of Terra Nova, not to talk about the progress we've made in advancing sustainable energy. Today, I'm here to expose something far bigger." The room grew quiet, reporters leaning in, eager for the next piece of the puzzle. "We've uncovered a critical piece of information," Elon continued, his eyes scanning the room. "For years, the fossil fuel industry and its allies have been manipulating global markets, positioning themselves as champions of the environment while secretly maintaining their stranglehold on the world's resources. But what's even more disturbing is this: one of the largest renewable energy investment groups in the world is owned by some of the same people who profit from fossil fuels." The gasps were immediate. Reporters exchanged shocked glances as the weight of Elon's words began to sink in. "We've seen the documents, the financial transactions, the investment portfolios. These are the same individuals who have been publicly supporting clean energy, but behind closed doors, they've been making billions off the exploitation of oil, gas, and coal. They've been using renewable energy as a smokescreen, and we have the proof. He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle. We are releasing all of this evidence today. The world deserves to know the truth. As Elon finished speaking, the room erupted into chaos. The cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the frenzy of activity was almost overwhelming. But Elon stood firm, knowing that this was the moment that could change the tide of the battle. If this information spread, it would hit the fossil fuel industry where it hurt most, in their wallets and their public image. He stepped off the stage, his team quickly ushering him to a back room, away from the pandemonium. Greg was waiting for him, a look of nervous anticipation on his face. "We did it," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's out. The world knows now." Elon nodded, his mind still racing. The battle wasn't over. In fact, this could be the beginning of something far bigger. But they had struck a major blow. As the chaos outside continued to unfold, Elon took a moment to reflect on what he had just done. He had placed everything on the line, his companies, his reputation, even his freedom. But there was no turning back now. The world had seen the truth, and the revolution had already begun. Hours later, the media storm was in full force. The information had gone viral. Social media was flooded with outrage from environmentalists, shock from the general public, and even disbelief from investors who had been duped by the industry's greenwashing tactics. But there was also an undercurrent of fear. The fossil fuel giants weren't going to take this lying down. The first wave of counterattacks had already begun, with claims of misinformation, threats of lawsuits, and statements from political allies attempting to discredit Elon. But Elon wasn't afraid. He knew this was the beginning of a new fight, one that would determine the future of the planet. As night fell, Elon found himself standing alone on the balcony of his office, staring at the sprawling city below. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing: the tipping point had come. The battle for the future had just begun. The day after Elon's press conference, the world was still reeling from the revelations. Social media was flooded with reactions: outraged fossil fuel advocates, confused environmentalists, and disbelieving investors. The mainstream media didn't know how to handle it. Some outlets were calling Elon's actions heroic, while others were dubbing him reckless. No one knew how the dust would settle. But one thing was certain: the fossil fuel giants had just been exposed, and they weren't going to go down quietly. By mid-afternoon, Elon was back in his office, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. The room was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Greg, Maria, and the rest of the team stood by, awaiting the next move. "Elon, we've got a serious problem," Greg began, his voice urgent. "Big Oil is mobilizing. They've pulled every lever they can. The SEC, the Department of Justice, they're all starting to look at us. I just got word that we've been hit with a federal investigation. It's official." Elon felt the familiar knot of tension form in his stomach, but his face remained calm. This was the moment he had been preparing for. "What exactly are they investigating?" "Everything," Greg said. "From SpaceX to Tesla to Terra Nova. They're claiming we've been involved in illegal market manipulation and that we're guilty of undermining national security. They're going after everything we've built." The implications were staggering. If the government sided with the fossil fuel industry, it could lead to massive fines, halted projects, and even criminal charges. But Elon had anticipated this. He had expected the retaliation would be severe, and now, it was his chance to fight back, not just for his companies, but for the future of the planet. "I've been in battles before," Elon said, his voice unwavering. "This is no different. We knew it wouldn't be easy. We've got the truth on our side, and that's the most powerful weapon we have." Maria leaned in, her eyes scanning a series of reports on her tablet. "But, Elon, we don't have a lot of time. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that public sentiment will shift against us. The media is already turning. We need to go on the offensive." We can't just react anymore, we have to make the first move. Elon took a deep breath, considering their options. He had a choice now: he could defend against the oncoming storm, or he could take the fight to them. We need to get ahead of this, Elon said, determination setting in. It's time to expose everything. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. That night, Elon and his team worked tirelessly, preparing for a series of counterattacks. Greg and Maria worked through legal strategies, while Elon focused on crafting a public response that would take the pressure off his companies and put it squarely on the fossil fuel industry. By morning, the plan was in motion. Elon held a press conference, his tone resolute, his resolve clear. I understand that many of you are questioning the path we're on, Elon began, addressing the camera. The fossil fuel industry has launched an all-out attack on Terra Nova and my companies. They've mobilized government agencies, they've manipulated the media, and they've used their vast resources to try to stop progress. But they've underestimated one thing: the truth always comes to light. He paused for emphasis, letting the weight of his words sink in. I'm not here to talk about what's fair or unfair. I'm here to talk about the future. A future where we rely on clean, renewable energy, where the old guard of big oil is dismantled for good. But to do that, we need to expose the entire system for what it is. That's why today, we are releasing all of the evidence we've uncovered about the fossil fuel industry's manipulation of both the energy market and public opinion. Elon's voice hardened as he delivered the next bombshell. We've gathered information from multiple whistleblowers, documents, and financial records that show how big oil and its allies have been sabotaging renewable energy projects across the globe. They've been funneling money into lobbying efforts, spreading misinformation, and buying political influence. This isn't just corporate greed, it's corporate corruption at the highest level. And we have the proof. The room went silent as Elon finished speaking. This was more than just a defense, it was a call to arms. As the day progressed, the media cycle went into overdrive. The first wave of stories, some sympathetic, others skeptical, began circulating. But there was one thing no one could deny: the evidence Elon had provided was damning. The financial records, the testimonies, the data, it all painted a picture of systemic corruption on a scale no one had ever imagined. But as expected, the retaliation was swift. The fossil fuel industry was not going to let this slide. Their counterattack came quickly, with industry leaders issuing statements calling Elon's claims wildly exaggerated and part of a coordinated smear campaign. The political figures they had in their pocket began voicing their support, questioning the legitimacy of the investigation and accusing Elon of trying to destabilize the economy. Elon Musk is a dangerous man, said one senator, speaking on a popular news network. His attacks on the fossil fuel industry are reckless and harmful. This kind of behavior could lead to an economic collapse, and we cannot allow that to happen. But Elon wasn't backing down. His team worked with their legal counsel to release even more evidence, details about fossil fuel companies' behind-the-scenes deals with international governments, their covert attempts to block climate policies, and their secret investments in dirty energy projects that had been hidden from the public eye. As the war escalated, Elon realized that this fight wasn't just about protecting Terra Nova, SpaceX, or Tesla, it was about something bigger. It was about changing the way the world saw energy. It was about tipping the balance of power away from the corporate oligarchs who had controlled the narrative for so long. Weeks passed, and the battle raged on. Public opinion was divided, with some rallying behind Elon's message of transparency and sustainability, while others fell into line with the oil industry's defense. Every day brought new challenges, legal battles, public scrutiny, and personal attacks. But through it all, Elon remained steadfast, determined to see his vision through. Late one evening, as he sat alone in his office, his phone rang. It was Greg. "Elon," Greg said, his voice a mixture of excitement and exhaustion, "we've got some good news. The investors are starting to come back. It's not a flood yet, but the tide is turning." Elon felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to win this battle. The last stand was working. He had held the line, and now, the fight for the future was starting to shift in his favor. But he knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over. The days that followed Elon's press conference were a blur. News outlets reported on his bold claims, the media frenzy continued to spiral, and both sides of the battle began digging in their heels. The fossil fuel giants, with their immense power and influence, were fighting back hard, but the public was starting to listen. It was a strange, almost surreal time. For the first time in years, Elon felt that his vision was on the brink of achieving something monumental. Yet, the weight of it all still bore heavily on him. The media was starting to turn in his favor, but every victory came with a price. Every positive article about Terra Nova or his efforts to expose corruption was countered by an attack on his personal life, his character, or his company's. The constant barrage of negativity was exhausting. But there was one shift that couldn't be ignored. Investors, the lifeblood of his ventures, were starting to pay attention. Slowly at first, but then with increasing urgency, they began to re-enter the fray. Some reached out to Elon directly, wanting to know how they could help, while others quietly repositioned their assets. Terra Nova, SpaceX, and Tesla had become symbols of hope in an increasingly volatile world, and Elon was beginning to sense that the tide was turning. It was late one night when Greg called with some news that would change the course of the battle. Elon was seated at his desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and endless reports. The glow of his computer screen cast a dim light over the room, reflecting his exhaustion. He had barely slept in days. "Elon," Greg's voice came through, steady but urgent. "I think we've got something." Elon's eyes flicked to the phone, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "I've been tracking the financial trends, and there's been a huge shift. It's small for now, but it's real. Fossil fuel stocks are beginning to drop. Big oil's investors are pulling out faster than anyone expected. We've got a window of opportunity." Elon sat up straighter, trying to push past the weariness that clouded his mind. This was what he had been waiting for. "How much time do we have?" "Not much. Maybe a week at most. The next round of government hearings is coming up, and if we can get ahead of them, if we can really capitalize on this momentum, we might just win. But we need to make it public, fast. We can't afford to waste any more time." The pressure was mounting again, but this time, Elon wasn't alone. Greg, Maria, and the rest of the team were all on board, working tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of the fight. They knew what was at stake. This was the moment that could either propel Terra Nova, SpaceX, and Tesla into the future, or it could tear them all down. In the days that followed, Elon made a bold decision. He would leverage the media and investor sentiment one last time. He wasn't just going to react anymore, he was going to act. He called a press conference, his heart beating faster than usual as he prepared to address the world again. This time, the message would be different. No more defense. It was time to go on the offensive and finish what he had started. As the room filled with reporters, cameras flashing and microphones reaching forward, Elon walked up to the podium. This wasn't a man worn down by the fight, this was a man resolute, ready to lead the charge into the next phase of the battle. "Elon Musk," he began, his voice calm but firm, "is not here to fight for himself or his companies. I'm here because the future is worth fighting for. We've seen firsthand the immense power the fossil fuel industry has over our world, how they've manipulated the truth, silenced the voices of the people, and kept us trapped in an energy system that's destroying the planet. But today, we stand at a crossroads." He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. Fossil fuel stocks are falling. Investors are fleeing their old investments, looking for cleaner alternatives. And for the first time in history, the tides of change are turning in our favor. But it's not enough. We need action, not just words. That's why we are calling on every single investor, every corporation, and every government official to stop turning a blind eye to the truth. We are calling on them to reinvest in renewable energy, to take the necessary steps to end the era of fossil fuels once and for all. The audience was silent as they absorbed his words. Today, we are announcing our next phase, Elon continued. We are increasing our investments in clean energy, in sustainable technology, in the solutions that will drive this revolution forward. And we will do so with the full backing of our supporters, investors, scientists, and engineers who believe in a future that's not controlled by big oil. He paused, a flicker of resolve crossing his face. And I want to make it clear, Elon said, locking eyes with the room full of reporters, this is only the beginning. We won't stop until every last dollar that fuels the fossil fuel industry is redirected toward building a cleaner, greener future. And if they want to fight, if they want to try and stop us, let them come. We're ready. The impact was immediate. By the end of the day, the media coverage was unparalleled. The message had been heard. Across the world, people began to take notice. Investors took action, and public sentiment began to shift in favor of the revolution. Elon's words had struck a chord. People were tired of being lied to, tired of seeing their futures dictated by an industry that didn't care about the planet, and tired of the constant fight for survival in a world that seemed to be spiraling into crisis. But it wasn't just the public who was reacting. Behind closed doors, big oil was in a panic. Elon's statements had ignited a wildfire of change in the financial markets. Stocks plummeted. The pressure from global governments to hold these companies accountable grew unbearable. And for the first time in months, it seemed that Terra Nova had the upper hand. However, the backlash was far from over. The fossil fuel giants weren't just going to roll over. Their influence ran deep, and they had far-reaching allies who were willing to do whatever it took to stop the revolution. In the next few days, there were reports of coordinated attacks on Tesla's infrastructure, cyber attacks aimed at compromising SpaceX's satellites, and even anonymous attempts to discredit Elon on social media. They weren't playing by the rules anymore, they were fighting dirty. But Elon was prepared. He had weathered storms before, and this was no different. His resolve only grew stronger as the stakes became clearer. We're not backing down, he told Greg and Maria one evening as they sat in their war room. This is it, the final stand. We finish what we started, no matter what it takes. The tide had turned, but the battle was still far from over. The forces aligned against Elon were formidable. The future hung in the balance. But Elon Musk was ready. The atmosphere in Elon Musk's command center was thick with tension. The days since his public declaration had brought waves of both hope and challenge. Investors were flooding back into his ventures, public opinion was slowly swinging toward his side, and there was a sense of momentum that couldn't be ignored. But at the same time, the opposition was no less formidable, no less determined to bring him, and his vision, down. The fossil fuel industry, having lost ground in the stock market, had intensified their counterattacks. Every move Elon made was scrutinized. Every announcement he made was dissected. The government hearings were approaching, and the final battle was on the horizon. The phone rang at his desk, its shrill sound cutting through the silence in the room. Elon picked up, knowing it was time to act. Elon, we've got a serious problem, Greg's voice came through, strained. There's been an orchestrated cyber attack. It's hitting us hard. Elon's stomach dropped. The cyber attack was the last thing he needed right now, especially with the stakes this high. What do you mean, Greg? We've detected a massive breach in the systems. SpaceX's satellite network is compromised, Tesla's infrastructure is being targeted, and there are reports of data being stolen from Terra Nova's research division. This is organized. It's not just some rogue hackers. This is big oil throwing everything they have at us. The room seemed to close in on Elon as he processed the magnitude of the attack. His companies were under assault, not just from public pressure or legal challenges, but from a direct, malicious strike on their most crucial systems. The very technologies that had been central to his vision were now under threat. They're not wasting any time, Elon said, his voice steely. But we're not backing down. Get our top security teams on this right now. I want every defense activated. We'll take the fight to them. As Greg confirmed the orders, Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The threat was real, and if the cyber attack succeeded, it could set back his mission for years. The infrastructure of SpaceX and Tesla, the clean energy breakthroughs at Terra Nova, all of it could be crippled in an instant. Meanwhile, the government hearings were growing closer. Elon knew this would be the ultimate test of his vision. He had to stand his ground and confront the powerful political figures who were still in the pocket of big oil. These hearings would determine whether his companies would survive or be strangled by bureaucratic red tape and corporate influence. On the eve of the hearings, Elon stood before a mirror in his private office. His reflection stared back at him, tired, but resolute. His body had been through the ringer, his mind had been stretched to the breaking point, but his vision was still intact. "You can't quit now," he murmured to himself. The stakes were too high. The planet's future was too important. The next morning, the world was watching as Elon Musk took his seat before the congressional committee. The hearing was being broadcast live, and the room was packed with reporters, lawmakers, and representatives from the fossil fuel industry, all eager to see how this drama would unfold. Elon's face was calm, but his heart was racing. He had been in high-pressure situations before, but this felt different. This was the moment of reckoning. The committee chairman, Senator Caldwell, a longtime ally of big oil, opened the session with a pointed question. "Mr. Musk, you've made a lot of bold claims about the fossil fuel industry. You've accused them of manipulation, of corruption, of holding back progress. But where's your proof? And more importantly, how do you justify the immense cost of your ventures?" Elon took a deep breath. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. "I have the proof," Elon replied, his voice steady. "And the cost of our ventures is not just measured in dollars. It's measured in the future of this planet. We are at a crossroads. Either we continue down this destructive path, led by an industry that profits off polluting the earth, or we step into a new era, one where clean energy powers our world, where technology and innovation are used to heal the planet, not destroy it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. The cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of innovation. It's measured in rising seas, wildfires, droughts, and displacement. The very systems that have been propping up fossil fuel companies for decades are the ones that will be responsible for our children inheriting a dying planet. I refuse to let that happen. The room was still, the tension palpable. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Senator Caldwell spoke, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You speak of a future that's full of hope, Mr. Musk, but you've also created a world of uncertainty. You've disrupted the status quo, and with it, you've destabilized the economy. People are losing jobs, industries are in chaos, and now you want us to bet on your unproven technologies?" Elon met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not asking you to bet on my technology. I'm asking you to bet on the future. If we do nothing, the consequences will be catastrophic. But if we act now, we can create millions of new jobs in clean energy, we can build a sustainable economy, and we can stop the destruction of our planet. The future doesn't need to be uncertain, it needs to be bold." The committee was split. Some lawmakers were swayed by Elon's impassioned plea, while others remained firmly in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry. The battle wasn't over yet. The hearings had only begun, and the true test of Elon's resolve was still ahead. But as Elon walked out of the hearing room, he felt something shift within him. The battle for the future wasn't just about markets, technology, or politics, it was about something far deeper. It was about the survival of the planet, about leaving a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. The cyber attacks, the political pressures, the financial setbacks, they were just hurdles. The real fight, the one that would determine the course of history, was still raging. And Elon was determined to win. The next day, the media was alive with debate over the hearing. Some hailed Elon as a visionary, while others decried him as a dangerous radical. But there was one thing that was undeniable: his message had resonated. For the first time in a long while, the narrative was shifting in his favor. However, as the dust settled, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the final chapter of this war was still to come. Big Oil was down, but not out. The fight was far from over, and there was still a long road ahead. But as he sat back in his office, surrounded by his team, he knew one thing for certain: no matter what came next, he wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The world had been holding its breath for weeks. The hearing had ended in a draw. Elon's impassioned plea had shaken many in the room, but the power of Big Oil's influence was still deeply entrenched. Senators, lobbyists, and corporate giants continued to work behind the scenes, maneuvering their pieces on the chessboard in an attempt to crush the change Elon was trying to bring. But despite their power, the momentum was starting to build in a direction that they couldn't stop. Elon could feel it. The public was on his side. Investors were flocking to his companies. And the pressure on the fossil fuel giants was intensifying. They were floundering, trying to keep their empire standing as the ground beneath them shifted. But they had underestimated one thing: Elon's resolve. The day after the hearing, Elon gathered his closest team members in the war room of his headquarters. The room was filled with a sense of urgency, but also of determination. The final push was here, and they were ready to give everything they had. "All right," Elon said, his voice calm but firm, "we know what's at stake. This is the moment we've been preparing for. The world is watching, and we cannot afford to fail." Greg, Maria, and the rest of the core team nodded in agreement. It had been a long road, and now it all came down to this. "We need a decisive strike," Elon continued. "We've done everything we can to expose the truth. The media is on our side. The public is starting to understand. Now, we need to hit them where it hurts. We need to break the narrative." Greg leaned forward. "We have one last chance, an investor summit in 2 days. If we can convince the key players to make the final shift toward renewable energy, it will be a tipping point. If we can get the fossil fuel investors to publicly announce their move to divest, it will send a shockwave." Maria added, "But we need something big, something they can't ignore. We need to pull out all the stops." Elon's eyes narrowed, his mind working at full speed. "We have the technology. We have the support. But we need to show them that the future is not just possible, it's inevitable. We can't just be reactive anymore. We need to put them on the defensive." It was a bold plan. The summit would be their final chance to secure the financial backing needed to push through the final barriers and make clean energy the future. If they succeeded, it would be a massive leap toward victory. If they failed, it could spell the end of the revolution. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Elon's team worked tirelessly to craft a presentation that would be impossible to ignore. They had already gained significant ground in the media, but the summit was where the real battle would be fought. Elon knew that the investors who showed up had the power to change the course of history. But they were also deeply entrenched in the status quo, and convincing them to pivot their massive portfolios toward renewable energy would be no easy task. The day of the summit arrived, and Elon stepped into the grand conference hall with a sense of quiet resolve. He had been through high-stakes situations before, each one more dangerous than the last, but this felt different. This wasn't just about business. This was about saving the planet. The room was filled with some of the most influential figures in the world of finance, energy, and government. They all sat, eyes fixed on the stage as Elon walked up to the podium. "Elon Musk," he began, his voice unwavering. "I'm here today not just to talk about profits, not just to talk about numbers. I'm here to talk about something far more important, the future of this planet." He paused, allowing his words to settle in. "The choices we make today will determine what kind of world we leave for our children. We know the facts. The fossil fuel industry has been manipulating our economies for decades, using their wealth and influence to control the future. But that future is running out of time. Our world is on the brink of collapse, and it's time to make a change. He clicked a button, and the screen behind him flashed with images of climate disasters, wildfires, hurricanes, melting ice caps. The destruction was undeniable. But then, the screen shifted. It showed a world powered by clean energy, solar panels, wind farms, electric vehicles, and thriving ecosystems. This, Elon said, pointing to the images, is the future. And it's not just a dream. It's happening right now. The technology is here. The innovation is here. And with your investment, it can be scaled globally. We can create a world where energy is sustainable, where jobs are plentiful, and where the planet is preserved for generations to come. The room was silent. The faces in the crowd were hard to read, but there was no denying that his message had struck a chord. But we need you, Elon continued, his voice firm. We need you to take that step, to be the leaders who break the chains of the past and invest in a future that will change everything. We have the power to disrupt the energy market, to create jobs, to restore the planet's health. But we need the financial backing, and we need it now. He turned, and the screen behind him displayed one final image, an urgent call to action. The fossil fuel industry is dying. It's time to shift your investments before it's too late. The future is clean. The future is now. As the presentation ended, the room erupted into a mixture of applause and murmurs. The investors were deep in conversation, exchanging looks, some skeptical, some intrigued. It was clear that Elon had planted a seed in their minds, a seed that would continue to grow long after the summit ended. Greg and Maria stood at the back of the room, watching the crowd. There was a sense of cautious optimism in the air, but they knew the real battle was just beginning. Convincing investors to act would take time, but the spark had been lit. That night, as Elon sat in his office, the weight of the moment hit him. The final push was done. The message had been delivered. Now, it was up to the world to decide whether to accept the future or continue down the dangerous path of inaction. But no matter what happened, Elon knew one thing for certain: he had done everything he could. The revolution was no longer just a vision, it was real. And it was unstoppable. It was the morning after the summit, and Elon stood by the window of his office, watching as the sun rose over the city. The light filtered through the glass, casting long shadows across his desk. The past few days had been a blur of negotiations, intense discussions, and critical decisions. But now, there was a strange sense of calm that hung in the air. The final push had been made. The message had been delivered. The world had been watching. Investors were swarming to renewables, governments were starting to acknowledge the urgent need for change, and the momentum was undeniable. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The real test was still ahead. As Elon stood there, his phone rang. The number was unknown, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Elon, it's Greg. We've just gotten word from the board. The investors who were on the fence, some of the biggest names, are moving forward. They're pulling out of fossil fuels. The shift is happening. It's happening now. A surge of relief washed over Elon, but it didn't last long. There were still 1,000 hurdles to overcome, countless obstacles that remained. The fight wasn't over yet. I've heard this before, Greg, Elon replied, his voice steady. How sure are you? It's happening. We've confirmed it with several major institutions. This is the tipping point. It's irreversible now. Elon nodded to himself. The weight of the battle hadn't lifted, but there was something in Greg's tone, something he hadn't heard before: hope. Real, palpable hope. Hours later, the world awoke to a historic announcement. The headline of every major news outlet screamed the same thing: investors abandon fossil fuels, embrace the future of clean energy. The market responded instantly. Fossil fuel stocks began to plummet as trillions of dollars in investments flowed into the renewable energy sector. The change was seismic, a tidal wave that would take years to fully play out but had already begun to reshape the future. The news reverberated through every corner of the world, from the halls of power to the homes of everyday people. And in that moment, the revolution felt real. It wasn't just a vision anymore, it was a movement. Elon Musk had proven the naysayers wrong. He had fought against the world's most powerful industries and won. But it wasn't the headlines or the stock market numbers that mattered most to him. It was the quiet moments, the conversations with his team, the glimmer of hope he saw in his children's eyes, the realization that he had made a difference. That, in itself, was a victory. Elon sat at his desk, looking over the data from the latest market reports. His eyes lingered on the numbers, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the years of struggle, the countless obstacles, the sacrifices. He thought about the people who had stood by him, those who had doubted him, and those who had tried to tear him down. He thought about the future that had finally arrived. Mr. Musk, a voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Maria standing in the doorway, holding a tablet in her hand. Her face was flushed with excitement. "Elon, you need to see this," she said, her eyes wide with amazement. "We just got confirmation. The first global coalition of governments is officially announcing their support for the transition to clean energy. It's happening. The revolution isn't just corporate, it's political. It's worldwide." Elon stood up, his heart racing. This was it. The final victory. He walked over to Maria, taking the tablet from her. The screen displayed a joint statement from governments around the world, pledging to shift their energy infrastructures to 100% renewable sources within the next 2 decades. It was the moment he had been fighting for. The final nail in the coffin for the fossil fuel industry. And with it came the promise of a cleaner, greener, more sustainable future for generations to come. Later that evening, Elon stood on a stage, his heart full of pride as he addressed a crowd of thousands, investors, supporters, and activists who had helped make this moment possible. The atmosphere was electric, the energy palpable. This was the culmination of everything they had fought for. He looked out at the crowd, his voice steady as he spoke. "This is not just a victory for us. This is a victory for the future. For the planet. For our children. We've shown the world that change is possible. We've shown that innovation and determination can overcome even the most entrenched powers. We've proven that together, we can build a world that is sustainable, equitable, and free from the destructive forces that have held us back for too long." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the stadium. Elon paused, allowing the applause to die down before he continued. "We have one more thing to do. This revolution doesn't end with the market shift or with the government pledges. It ends with all of us, the individuals, the families, the communities, taking the next step. The real work is just beginning. Now we must push forward to ensure that the future we've created is one that works for everyone. The change we've started is just the beginning. Together, we will continue to build." That night, as Elon sat in the quiet of his office, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The journey had been long, filled with sacrifices, setbacks, and victories. But in the end, it had all been worth it. He looked at the photos of his children on his desk, the next generation that would inherit the world he had fought to save. He smiled to himself. The revolution had won. And with it, a new era had begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?